At 11:27 p.m. on October 22, 2012, a grandmother's screams pierced through the quiet hallways of the Marquee apartment complex in King of Prussia, Pennsylvania. 61-year-old Saanvi Venna was fighting for her life and the life of her 10-month-old granddaughter Saanvi. The attacker wasn't a stranger who had broken into their home. It was someone she trusted completely, a family friend who had held baby Saanvi just 2 days earlier at a birthday party, laughing and playing with the child he would soon murder. Welcome back to our channel, where we examine the cases that shake us to our core and force us to question everything we think we know about the people around us. If the story impacts you the way it should, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what you're about to hear will fundamentally change how you view the intersection of the American dream and the American nightmare. This is the story of Raghunandan Yandamuri, a 28-year-old software engineer from India who became the first Indian American ever sentenced to death in the United States. But this isn't just another murder case. This is about how financial desperation, mental illness, and gambling addiction can transform a trusted family friend into a monster capable of unspeakable acts against the most innocent victims imaginable. King of Prussia, Pennsylvania, sits in the heart of Montgomery County, about 20 miles northwest of Philadelphia. It's the kind of suburban community that attracts young professionals and immigrant families seeking their piece of the American dream. The area is home to one of the largest shopping malls on the East Coast and countless apartment complexes filled with H-1B visa holders working in the technology sector. In this community lived the Venna family, Venkata Kanda Shiva Venna, his wife Lata, and their precious 10-month-old daughter Saanvi. Like many Indian families in the area, they had come to America seeking better opportunities. Shiva worked as a software engineer, and they lived a quiet, comfortable life in their 2-bedroom apartment at the Marquee complex on Gulf Creek Drive. Also living in the same community was Raghunandan Yandamuri, who seemed to embody everything about immigrant success in America. Born on February 21, 1986, in Andhra Pradesh, India, Yandamuri had arrived in the United States in 2010 on an H-1B visa. He was educated, employed as a software engineer, and appeared to be living the dream that millions of immigrants aspire to achieve. But appearances, as we've learned time and again in these cases, can be devastatingly deceptive. The Venna and Yandamuri families moved in the same social circles within the tight-knit Telugu community in the Philadelphia area. They attended the same cultural events, celebrated the same festivals, and shared the bonds that often form between immigrants navigating life in a new country together. Yandamuri wasn't just an acquaintance. He was considered a friend, someone trusted enough to be invited into their home and to hold their baby daughter. On October 20, 2012, just 2 days before the murders, both families attended a birthday party for another community member. Witnesses later recalled seeing Yandamuri playing with baby Saanvi, holding her, making her laugh. The image of this trusted family friend cradling the child he would soon kill becomes even more haunting when you understand what was already brewing in his mind. What the Venna family didn't know, what none of their friends knew, was that Raghunandan Yandamuri was drowning. Behind his professional facade, he was battling demons that were consuming his life piece by piece. Yandamuri had developed a severe gambling addiction, spending countless hours and thousands of dollars at the Valley Forge Casino Resort, just 15 minutes from where both families lived. This wasn't casual gambling or occasional entertainment. This was a compulsive, destructive habit that had already cost him everything. In March 2012, 7 months before the murders, Yandamuri had filed for bankruptcy. Court documents show he was drowning in debt, unable to meet his basic financial obligations. But the bankruptcy filing didn't cure his addiction. It only made his situation more desperate. Here's where this story takes a turn that should terrify anyone who thinks they know their neighbors, their co-workers, their friends. In the 3 days immediately before the murders, October 19th, 20th, and 21st, Yandamuri lost over $34,000 gambling at Valley Forge Casino. $34,000 in 3 days. Money he didn't have. Money that pushed his total gambling debts to over $35,000. Think about that for a moment. Comment below and tell me, have you ever known someone whose addiction led them to make increasingly desperate choices? Because what happened next shows us just how far desperation can push a human being. Faced with crushing debt and no way to pay it back, Yandamuri's mind turned to a solution that reveals the depth of his moral collapse. He would kidnap baby Saanvi and demand $50,000 in ransom from her parents. In his twisted logic, this amount would cover his debts and give him a fresh start. But this wasn't a spontaneous decision made in a moment of panic. Evidence would later show that Yandamuri had been planning this crime, studying the family's routines, and waiting for the right opportunity. He knew that Shiva worked late hours and that Satyavath, the baby's grandmother, often stayed alone with Saanvi in the evenings. On the night of October 22, 2012, Yandamuri saw his chance. Shiva was working late, and Lata was out of town. Only Satyavath and baby Saanvi were in the apartment, two of the most vulnerable people imaginable, alone and trusting. What Yandamuri didn't anticipate was that a 61-year-old grandmother would fight like a warrior to protect her granddaughter. The attack began at approximately 11:27 p.m. Yandamuri entered the Venna apartment. Whether through deception or force, we may never know the complete truth. What we do know from the evidence is that when Satyavath realized what was happening, she fought with everything she had. The medical examiner's report tells a story of incredible courage and unimaginable brutality. Saanvi Venna suffered 3 separate chopping wounds to her neck, wounds so severe they struck bone. These weren't quick, clean cuts. They were the desperate, vicious attacks of someone trying to silence a woman who refused to let him take her granddaughter without a fight. Think about the strength it must have taken for this grandmother to keep fighting even as she was being attacked. Think about her final moments, knowing that her death might mean her granddaughter's death as well. The courage of this woman in her final minutes should humble all of us. But Satyavath's heroic resistance wasn't enough to save baby Saanvi. After murdering the grandmother, Yandamuri took the 10-month-old child and carried her down to the apartment complex's fitness center. There, in the sauna room, he placed baby Saanvi inside a suitcase and left her to suffocate. A 10-month-old baby, placed in a suitcase, left to die alone in a dark, hot room. I want you to pause here and think about what kind of person can do that to a child. What kind of human being can look at a baby he had held and played with just 2 days earlier, and make the decision to end her life in such a horrific way. After committing these unspeakable acts, Yandamuri returned to his apartment and composed a ransom note. This note would ultimately become the key evidence that led to his capture, but it also reveals something deeply disturbing about his mindset. The note was addressed to Lata and Shiva, the nicknames used by close family and friends. Only someone with intimate knowledge of the family would know to use these informal names rather than their formal names. This wasn't random crime. This was the ultimate betrayal of trust. In the note, Yandamuri demanded $50,000 and provided specific instructions for the money drop. He wrote as if baby Saanvi was still alive, as if this was a normal kidnapping that could end with a happy reunion. But Saanvi was already dead, suffocated in that suitcase in the gym sauna. The psychological disconnect required to write that note, to pretend the baby was alive when he knew he had killed her, gives us a window into the complete moral breakdown of someone who had once been a trusted friend. When Saanvi Venna returned home and discovered the scene, the investigation began immediately. The King of Prussia Police, working with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, launched one of the most intensive manhunts in the area's recent history. The ransom note provided crucial clues. The intimate knowledge of the family's nicknames immediately pointed investigators toward someone within their social circle. But it was modern technology that ultimately led them to their suspect. Cell phone records placed Yandamuri near the apartment complex at the time of the murders. Security cameras from various locations tracked his movements. Most damning of all, casino records showed his massive gambling losses in the days immediately before the crime, providing clear motive for his desperate actions. On October 25th, just 3 days after the murders, police found Yandamuri at the Valley Forge Casino, the same casino where he had lost the money that drove him to commit murder. He was gambling again, as if the deaths of a grandmother and baby were just obstacles he had overcome in pursuit of his addiction. At 7:11 a.m. on October 26, 2012, after hours of interrogation, Raghunandan Yandamuri confessed to both murders. The confession was captured on video, And while those recordings are too disturbing for public viewing, court transcripts reveal the cold, calculated nature of his admissions. Yandamuri showed investigators exactly where he had hidden baby Saanvi's body. He walked them through his actions step by step, describing how he had killed Satyavath and then suffocated the baby. He expressed no remorse, no recognition of the magnitude of his actions. During the confession, investigators learned additional details that made the case even more horrifying. Yandamuri had been suffering from bipolar disorder, a condition that had gone largely untreated. He also revealed that his childhood had been marked by trauma. He had witnessed his father's murder by Maoist rebels in India in 1997, when he was just 11 years old. But here's what I want you to think about. Do these factors explain his actions? Do they justify what he did to an innocent grandmother and baby? Mental illness and childhood trauma affect millions of people who never hurt anyone. What makes one person seek help while another chooses to destroy innocent lives? Yandamuri's trial began in 2014, nearly 2 years after the murders. From the beginning, it was clear this would be a death penalty case. The prosecutors, led by the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office, presented overwhelming evidence of premeditation and extreme cruelty. The defense attempted to argue that Yandamuri's mental illness should spare him from the death penalty. They brought in experts to testify about his bipolar disorder and childhood trauma. They painted a picture of a man whose mind had been broken by circumstances beyond his control. But the prosecution presented a different picture. They showed the jury evidence of careful planning, of a man who had made conscious choices at every step of his crime. They demonstrated that Yandamuri knew right from wrong, that he had tried to cover up his actions, and that he had shown no mercy to his victims. The most powerful testimony came from the victims' family members. Saanvi Venna, who had lost both his mother-in-law and his daughter, spoke about the destruction Yandamuri had brought to their lives. He described coming home to find the bodies, the horror of realizing that someone he trusted had betrayed them in the most unimaginable way. On October 15, 2014, after deliberating for just 4 hours, the jury returned their verdict: guilty on all counts. More significantly, they recommended the death penalty. When the judge formally sentenced Raghunandan Yandamuri to death, he became the first Indian American ever to receive the death penalty in the United States. This wasn't just another murder case. It was a legal and cultural milestone that sent shockwaves through immigrant communities across the country. The Telugu community in particular struggled to understand how one of their own could commit such acts. Many had known Yandamuri personally, had shared meals with him, had considered him a friend. The betrayal felt personal and collective. But the case also raised broader questions about the pressures facing immigrant communities. The expectation to succeed, the isolation from extended family support systems, the stress of maintaining legal status, all of these factors can create pressure cookers for individuals already struggling with mental health issues. I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think the unique pressures of immigration contributed to this tragedy? Or do you believe that personal responsibility transcends circumstances? As of 2024, Raghunandan Yandamuri remains on death row at SCI Somerset in Pennsylvania. His execution has been delayed multiple times due to Pennsylvania's death penalty moratorium, implemented by Governor Tom Wolf in 2015 and continued by subsequent administrations. Yandamuri's legal team continues to file appeals, arguing that his mental illness should have prevented a death sentence. They point to his bipolar disorder, his childhood trauma, and his lack of prior violent crimes as factors that should spare his life. But for the Venna family, these appeals mean that their nightmare continues year after year. Every legal filing forces them to relive the worst night of their lives. Every stay of execution reminds them that justice delayed is justice denied. This case teaches us several crucial lessons that we ignore at our own peril. First, addiction can transform anyone into someone capable of unthinkable acts. Yandamuri wasn't a career criminal or a violent person by nature. He was an educated professional whose gambling addiction drove him to murder. Second, mental illness is not an excuse for violence, but untreated mental illness can contribute to tragic outcomes. If Yandamuri had received proper treatment for his bipolar disorder, if his gambling addiction had been addressed before it consumed his life, would 2 innocent people still be alive today? Third, we must recognize that the people closest to us can harbor secrets that would shock us. The Venna family trusted Yandamuri completely. They welcomed him into their home, let him hold their baby, considered him part of their extended family. Yet he was planning their destruction even as he smiled at their dinner table. As I finish telling you this story, I want you to think about the people in your own life who might be struggling in silence. Yandamuri's gambling addiction and mental health issues didn't develop overnight. There were warning signs that his friends and community missed or chose to ignore. The bankruptcy filing in March 2012 should have been a red flag. His increasing absence from social gatherings, his apparent financial stress, his behavioral changes, all of these were indicators that someone needed help. But here's the most important question. What can we do to prevent tragedies like this in the future? How do we balance supporting struggling community members with protecting potential victims? I want to hear your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever missed warning signs in someone close to you? How do we create communities where people feel safe seeking help before their problems consume them and hurt innocent people? This case reminds us that evil can wear a familiar face, that trust can be weaponized, and that the American dream can become an American nightmare when desperation meets moral collapse. Saanvi Venna died protecting her granddaughter. Baby Saanvi died because someone she should have been able to trust chose money over humanity. Their deaths demand that we do better as individuals, as communities, and as a society that claims to value the lives of the innocent above all else. If the story affected you the way it should have, subscribe to our channel and share it with others. These stories matter not just for their shock value, but for the lessons they teach us about recognizing evil before it strikes again. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that justice may be delayed, but it should never be denied.